She walked into the operating room, believing she was finally about to prove herself. Then she looked to her left and realized the person teaching her how to save a life was the sister our parents once called their cow, and quieted. How did the girl who dropped out of college to fund her dream end up holding the instruments on the other side of the table? My name is Janice Gonzalez. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a senior surgical physician assistant in trauma at University Hospital San Antonio. I've assisted in hundreds of surgeries, trained residents who now introduce themselves as doctors, and I've learned how to keep my hands steady even when my heart is breaking. But for most of my life, my family didn't see me that way. They saw me as a paycheck, a reliable transfer, a background character in my sister's highlight reel. And in about 6 hours, my sister, Dr. Victoria Gonzalez, PGY3, is scheduled to lead her first complex trauma case as primary operator. She's nervous. She's proud. Our parents are driving in to celebrate like it's a graduation ceremony with brighter lights. And she still doesn't know I'm going to be her first assist. She doesn't know I'm the reason she won't freeze when the bleeding starts. She doesn't know the voice coaching her through the incision belongs to the sister who gave up everything so she could even wear those scrubs. Right now, I'm sitting in my car in the parking garage, level 3, under a streetlight that flickers like it can't commit to staying on. The hospital hum is constant ventilation fans, distant ambulance sirens, the soft echo of people who never really stop moving. On the passenger seat is a manila folder, thick, bent at the corners, heavy in a way paper shouldn't be. It isn't just documents. It's 12 years of proof. I flip it open and the first thing I see is a Western Union receipt from January 2014. Transaction number 856 to 003. $800 sent home, like clockwork. I can still remember the cardboard dust stuck to my sweat that day, the ache in my lower back from lifting boxes, the way my stomach growled because I'd been trying to stretch a $20 bill across 11 days. Back then, I was supposed to be graduating from college. Instead, I was sending money home so my sister could build a future that everyone would celebrate, while I disappeared. Sometimes people ask me why I didn't tell anyone earlier, why I didn't scream, why I didn't fight, why I didn't refuse. The truth is, when you grow up learning that love is conditional, no doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like betrayal. And in my family, I was never allowed to be the one who betrayed them. Let me take you back to where it started. December 2013. I was 24, senior year at UT Austin, engineering major with a 3.6 gigapascals, 1 semester away from graduating. I came home for winter break expecting normal things, my mom's cooking, my dad's jokes, maybe a lecture about saving money. Instead, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table like they were about to assign me a sentence. My father, Daniel Gonzalez, was 51 then. He worked construction for 30 years. His hands looked permanently rough, like the world had been sanding them down. My mother, Carmen, managed housekeeping at a hospital, always tired, always practical, the kind of woman who could stretch a paycheck and still make it look like love. My sister Victoria was 18, sitting quiet in the corner chair. She had just graduated high school, and there was a blue acceptance letter stuck to our fridge with a magnet, UT Austin Biology, pre-med track. The letter looked like pride. It also looked like debt. My dad didn't waste time. "We need to talk about Victoria's future," he said. He said it like my future was already decided. "She's gifted," he continued. "College costs money. You're doing fine, almost done. But Victoria, she could be a doctor." My mother nodded, not meeting my eyes. "We need you to help." I stared at the acceptance letter, then at Victoria, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to laugh and tell them they were out of their minds. She looked down at her hands. She said nothing. "Help how?" I asked, already feeling my chest tighten. My mom's voice came out smooth, rehearsed. "Quit school, get a job, just for a few years, just until she gets through." It was like they were asking me to step off a moving train. I remember the way my stomach dropped. I remember the chipped corner of the table from when I was 7 and dropped a plate. I remember thinking, normal things exist around us, So why does this feel like my life is ending? 3 days later, I was in the registrar's office at UT Austin, filling out withdrawal forms. The academic advisor, a woman named Miss Holland, looked at my transcript like it was a mistake. "You have a 3.6 gigapascals in engineering," she said. "You're 1 semester away from graduating. Are you absolutely sure?" My hand shook when I signed. I told her, "It's a family thing." She slid the form into a folder and sighed. Good luck out there. That sentence followed me for years. I walked past the library on my way out and saw my classmates through the windows studying, laughing quietly, living inside the life I'd planned, and I just kept walking. Within a week, I interviewed at 3 places. Riverside Logistics, a warehouse on the east side of San Antonio. The supervisor, Tommy Reeves, glanced at my application and asked me one question. "Can you lift 50 pounds? "Yes." "Can you do it 300 times a shift?" "I'll learn." He hired me on the spot. 40 hours a week, $11.50 an hour. 5 a.m., start time, yellow safety vest, and steel-toe boots. Clean Pro Services put me on night shift downtown office buildings, 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., 20 hours a week, blue microfiber towels, industrial cleaner that burned your nose. Sterling Catering gave me weekend weddings and corporate events, white shirt, black slacks, 15 hours a week plus tips if we were lucky. I built a spreadsheet that first week color-coded like a life I could still control. Green for warehouse, blue for cleaning, white for catering. 75 hours total. I calculated my take-home after taxes. About $3,400 a month if I didn't miss a shift. Victoria's tuition was $1,200 a month. My parents said they needed another $2,000 for expenses, books, supplies, a new laptop, transportation, apartment deposit. I sent $3,200 the first month, kept $200 for myself. I still remember the first Western Union transfer. I walked in after the warehouse shift, sweat drying on my neck, boots covered in cardboard dust. The clerk printed the receipt. I stared at the numbers like they were my identity now. Transaction complete. I went home and ate a $1 menu dinner because it was all I could afford. 30 minutes later, my mom texted, "Received. Victoria needs new laptop." Not thank you. Not are you okay. Just Victoria needs. And I told myself, it's temporary. A few years. I can do this. But a few years turned into 5, then 7, then 12. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a daughter with a future and became a machine that produced money. The moment I understood that fully was March 2014 on Victoria's 19th birthday. I called home to wish her happy birthday. The phone rang 4 times. My mom answered. "Hello." "Hey, Mom, it's Janice. Is Victoria around?" I heard my father's voice in the background, talking to someone else, laughing. Relaxed like I wasn't a person, just a resource. "Yeah," he said. "Janice is our cash cow now. Victoria is the real achiever." I froze. The phone pressed into my ear. My hand started shaking so hard I almost dropped it. Call duration, 047. I hung up. And I didn't call home for 9 months, but I still sent the money. Because when your family trains you to believe your worth is what you provide, you keep paying even when it destroys you. And that's what I did until the day a trauma surgeon saw me scrubbing floors at 2:47 a.m. and decided I was more than what my parents named me. That's when my second life began. And that's why, in 6 hours, Victoria is going to walk into an operating room thinking she's finally meeting her moment and discover the sister she never looked for has been standing in the light the whole time. The hardest part about being the cash cow isn't the work. It's how quickly you become invisible. The first year, I kept telling myself it was temporary. I treated my exhaustion like a badge of honor. I told myself I was being strong, being loyal, doing what family does. When people at the warehouse asked why I worked so much, I shrugged and said, "Just saving up." I didn't say what I was saving up for, because the truth sounded too ugly when you said it out loud. I was saving up for someone else's life. At Riverside Logistics, time moved in numbers. Clock in at 4:57 a.m. If I was late, Tommy would look at me like disappointment had a name. Conveyor belt humming, boxes sliding past like the world's most boring parade. The scanner beeped so much it felt like it rewired my brain. I started measuring my days by what my body could tolerate. My hands blistered first. Then the blisters hardened into calluses. Then the calluses split open and bled anyway. The gloves they gave us were thin, cheap, and always damp with sweat by the second hour. Every shift felt like a test. How much of yourself can you lose and still keep moving? 6 months in, Tommy noticed blood soaking through my gloves. "You okay?" he asked during break, voice quieter than usual. "I'm fine," I lied, because that's what you say when you don't have another option. He stared at me for a long moment, then reached into his locker and pulled out a better pair of gloves, reinforced palms, padded, the kind that actually protected skin. "Use these," he said. It was the first kindness anyone had shown me in months, and it made my throat tighten in a way that embarrassed me. I took them and nodded too fast, afraid if I spoke, my voice would crack. That's the thing about survival mode, you don't just get tired. You get emotionally stingy. You hoard every ounce of strength like it's rent money. Night cleaning shifts were quieter, but somehow lonelier. Downtown office buildings at 11 p.m. felt like empty museums dedicated to other people's success. I pushed my cart past desks, filled with framed photos, trophies, coffee mugs with names on them, evidence that people were allowed to exist fully somewhere. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, white tile under my feet, vacuum humming behind me. Every floor I cleaned was a reminder. I was maintaining spaces I would never be invited to sit in. One night, I emptied a trash can and a torn college acceptance letter fell out. I don't know why it grabbed me, maybe because it looked like my own grief. I smoothed it open and read it. "Congratulations on your acceptance." Someone had thrown their future away like it was nothing. I folded it and put it in my pocket. I told myself I kept it as a weird souvenir, but the truth was simpler. I wanted proof that futures still existed. Weekend catering was the cruelest, not because it was physically harder, but because it made me watch the life I was funding from the outside. Weddings in hotels, corporate events with ice sculptures and champagne towers, people in gowns and tuxedos, laughing like money was an endless resource. I'd stand 3 feet from conversations about kids getting into Stanford or starting med school, holding a silver tray like I wasn't human. One woman once said, "Our daughter just started pre-med. We're so proud." Another answered, "That's incredible. She must have worked so hard." I stood there holding 12 crab cakes while they celebrated a daughter's future while mine had been quietly taken apart. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Victoria's Instagram story. Blue dress, college party, smiling with friends. Caption, "Best night ever." I put my phone away and went back to work. I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment with 2 roommates. My room was a corner of the living room, separated by a blue sheet. I could hear everything, TV, footsteps, laughter, while pretending privacy existed. Rent was $380 a month, my share. My alarm was set for 4:30 a.m. every morning. Breakfast was ramen, lunch was whatever was cheapest. Dinner was sometimes nothing, if I'd sent too much home and didn't want to admit it. I tracked my bank account like it was a heartbeat, and every month I sent money home like I was paying a debt for being born. My parents didn't ask how I was. They didn't ask if I slept. They didn't ask if I ate. They only asked for more. If I sent $3,200, they texted, "Received." If I sent $3,000, they asked, "Is something wrong?" 5 years went by like that. Then May 2017 hit, and it cracked something open in me. Victoria was graduating from college biology degree, summa cum laude, and my mother posted about it like it was the greatest triumph our family had ever known. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I asked Tommy for the day off. He called me into his office, and I saw the answer in his face before he said it. "It's inventory day," he told me. "I need everyone. It's my sister's graduation," I said, forcing the words out like they mattered. Tommy's eyes softened. "I'm sorry. I really am. But if you leave, I have to write you up." 3 write-ups, and I'd lose the only stable income I had. So I stayed. I worked inventory on the day my sister walked across the stage. I scanned boxes while my parents clapped. At 2 p.m., I bought crackers from the vending machine and ate them standing up, like I didn't deserve a chair. Then Facebook notifications popped up, photos of Victoria in her cap and gown, surrounded by family, cake, balloons, smiles. Caption, "So proud of our graduate." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't in a single photo. It wasn't even that they hated me. It was worse. They didn't think of me at all. By August 2018, Victoria was starting medical school at UT Health San Antonio. My parents threw a party. New laptop, new furniture, new clothes. My dad posted, "Our daughter, future doctor." That night, I was working a double catering shift, sauce stain on my sleeve, holding champagne flutes while my feet throbbed. At 8:23 p.m., I sent $900, added an extra $100 for her white coat and stethoscope. My mom texted back, THX, 3 letters, and I told myself not to feel anything, because feeling made it harder to keep going. Then November 2016 happened, the warehouse accident. My right hand got caught in the loading mechanism. Metal teeth, pain, blood. Tommy hit the emergency stop and swore like he was scared. "ER, now," he said. I drove myself, because an ambulance was a luxury I couldn't afford. 90 minutes in the waiting room. The doctor wrapped my finger and warned me, "If you don't let this heal, you could have permanent nerve damage." "I can't miss work," I said. He looked at me like he'd heard that sentence from 1,000 people who'd been forced to choose between their body and their bills. The bill was $890. I paid cash. My account dropped to $210. I went back to work 4 days later with a brace on my hand. Tommy brought me coffee that morning without saying a word. The scar stayed. A line across my finger that reminds me, this is what it costs when no one else pays. February 2017, I hit bottom in a different way. $12.83 in my bank account. Rent due in 3 days. Paycheck delayed. I sat on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., knees to my chest, staring at my phone like the number might change if I looked hard enough. Grace knocked on the door. "You okay?" I opened it and tried to lie. She saw my face and didn't let me. She sat beside me and said, "How much do you need?" "I can't take your money," I whispered, voice cracking. "I'm not asking," she said. "I'm offering." She sent $400 on the spot, and something inside me shifted, not relief, not exactly. It was the first time in years someone had helped me without expecting repayment in my soul. I paid her back 3 weeks later, but the moment stayed. It made me realize I couldn't keep living like my only purpose was to fund someone else. I didn't know how to change yet. I just knew I had to. And a month later, in a hospital hallway at 2:47 a.m., scrubbing floors under fluorescent lights, I met the woman who would open the door I didn't know still existed. Dr. Elena Bradford. She didn't know my family. She didn't know my sacrifices. She just looked at me, really looked, and did what my parents never did. She saw me. And that's where everything began to change. March 2017 was the month I learned something I hadn't believed in for a long time, that a door can appear in the middle of a wall if the right person bothers to look for it. I'd just crawled out of one of the worst nights of my life, the kind where you're sitting on a bathroom floor at 2 a.m., staring at $12.83 in your bank account and trying to convince yourself that this is still temporary. Grace had covered my rent with a Venmo transfer and a quiet kind of insistence that felt almost painful. Let someone help you for once. I paid her back, but I couldn't unfeel the shame. Not because she helped, but because my own family never once asked if I needed it. A week later, I took an extra night shift with Clean Pro at a new location, University Hospital San Antonio, the big trauma center downtown. They needed someone to scrub the ER floors, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 6 nights a week. The pay wasn't great, but the hours were steady. I told myself it was just another job. I didn't know it was the beginning of my second life. My first shift. I was buffing the hallway outside the trauma bays at 2:30 a.m. The floor machine hummed like a giant insect. The smell was disinfectant layered over something metallic that never truly leaves a hospital. The ER was quiet for once, but not peaceful, just resting between storms. I remember the white tile under my knees, the way the fluorescent lights made everything look too sharp, too honest. I remember thinking, this place is where people come when their lives fall apart, and I'm here polishing the floor like I'm polishing someone else's emergency. Then the door to trauma room 03 opened. A woman stepped out wearing green trauma scrubs, hair pulled back tight, her sleeves splattered with blood in a way that didn't look dramatic, it looked routine, which was somehow worse. Her ID badge swung at her hip. Dr. Elena Bradford, head of trauma surgery. She looked exhausted, like she'd been awake for a week, but her eyes were clear, focused. When she saw me kneeling in the hallway, she stopped. "You're new," she said. My first instinct was to apologize. I didn't know what for. That's what my body had learned to do around authority. Be small, be agreeable, don't take up space. "Yes, ma'am," I said. Her gaze dropped to my hand. I was holding a patient chart I'd accidentally picked up, thinking it was trash, because it was lying near my cart with other discarded papers. She frowned. "You read that?" she asked. My heart lurched. "No, sorry. I thought it was—" "You were reading it upside down," she said calmly. "Correctly." I froze. I didn't even realize I'd been reading. My eyes had just grabbed the words. My brain, trained by engineering lectures and warehouse counts, automatically made order out of data. I set the chart down fast, like it could burn me. Dr. Bradford studied me for a moment, like she was doing a quick assessment the way surgeons do, deciding what matters and what doesn't. "What's your name?" she asked. There was something strange about being asked that question in a place where I'd mostly felt like a tool, like my name might matter. "Janice," I said. She nodded once and walked away. That should have been it. A weird little moment in a long night. But 2 weeks later, she stopped me again. Same hallway, same hour, same machine humming. This time I was scrubbing a scuff mark on the tile like it had personally insulted me. She approached with a coffee cup in her hand, her steps quiet despite how tired she looked. "What were you studying?" she asked. I blinked up at her. "Excuse me?" "Before this," she said, gesturing lightly toward my gloves, my cart, my kneeling posture. "What were you doing before you started here?" I swallowed. "College. What did you study?" "Engineering," I admitted, and the word felt like a bruise. Her eyebrows lifted, the first sign of surprise. "Did you finish?" "No." "Why not?" I could have told her the truth. I could have said, because my parents decided my sister's future mattered more than mine, because I was told to quit, because I believed love had a price tag. But that story is heavy. And at 3 a.m., it sits in your mouth like something you might choke on. So I gave her the short version. "Life happened," I said. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "That's a shame." I nodded and went back to scrubbing, because I didn't know what else to do when someone spoke to me like I was human. She watched me for a second longer than necessary, then said something that landed like a shock. "You seem sharper than half the med students rotating through here." I stared at her, not sure if she was joking. She wasn't smiling. I didn't know how to respond, so I looked down and kept working. My cheeks burned. Compliments felt dangerous. They felt like someone offering you a hand on a ledge you didn't trust would hold your weight. She pushed off the wall and started to walk away. Then she stopped and turned back. "There's a coffee pot in the break room," she said. "It's terrible coffee, but it's free. Help yourself." And then she was gone. That was it. No speech, no dramatic music, just a trauma surgeon telling a cleaning worker where to find free coffee. But that night, I took my break at 3:15 a.m. and walked into the break room anyway. It smelled like burnt coffee and vending machine heat. There was an old couch pushed against the wall and a plastic table that had seen too many late-night arguments. I poured myself a cup of coffee that tasted like regret. A minute later, Dr. Bradford walked in and sat down across from me like we were equals. "You ever think about going back to school?" she asked. I almost laughed, but it came out more like a breath. "I can't afford it," I said. "There are programs," she replied. matter of fact, financial aid, loans. Then she reached into her bag and slid a pamphlet onto the table between us. Physician Assistant Program, UT Health San Antonio, 3 years. Clinical rotations. I stared at the pamphlet like it was a dare. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, because kindness without a hook felt unfamiliar. She didn't blink. "Because I see people," she said, "and you're wasting yourself here." My throat tightened so fast I had to look away. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Not my parents. Not Victoria. Not even myself. Dr. Bradford stood up, tossed her coffee cup, and walked out like she'd just dropped a tool where I could reach it. I kept that pamphlet in my jacket pocket for 2 weeks. I read it on the bus during my warehouse lunch break. I read it between catering shifts. I read it at 4 a.m., in my partitioned living room, bedroom, while Grace slept behind her door. Prerequisites: anatomy, physiology, chemistry. I had credits from UT Austin. I could do some online. I could maybe, possibly, stitch together a path back to myself. But every time hope rose in my chest, reality punched it down. Victoria's med school costs would be massive. My parents were counting on me. If I stopped sending money, what would happen? Would they turn on me? Would they guilt me? Would Victoria suffer? I told myself the same lie I'd told myself for years. It's not about me. 2 weeks later, Dr. Bradford found me again in the hallway. "I'll write you a recommendation letter if you want it," she said. I stopped the buffer, the hum fading into the quiet like the world itself was waiting. "Why?" I asked. She exhaled, like she couldn't believe I still didn't understand. "Because you're wasting yourself," she said again, firmer this time. "And I don't like watching talent rot." I shook my head. "I can't stop working." "Financial aid exists," she said. "Loans exist. You're 27. You have time." "I have responsibilities," I said, and my voice came out sharper than I meant it to. "To who?" she asked. I hesitated, then said the word that had ruled my life for years. "Family." She reached into her pocket, found a pen, and wrote something on a paper towel from the dispenser. She tore it off and handed it to me. Her cell number. "Think about it," she said. "Call me." That paper towel sat in my wallet for days. I'd pull it out and stare at it like it was a map. A way out, a risk. 3 nights later, I spent my entire shift researching PA programs, federal loans, income-based repayment plans. I did the math like my life depended on it because it did. If I cut down from 3 jobs to 2, worked 50 hours instead of 75, took out loans, lived even smaller than I already did, I could still send money home and go back to school. It would be tight, it would be brutal, but it would be possible. At 1:14 a.m., in a coffee shop using free Wi-Fi, hands trembling from caffeine and fear, I texted Dr. Bradford. "I want to try." She replied 6 minutes later. "Good, I'll send you the application link tomorrow." I stared at her message until my eyes blurred. Then I closed my phone and sat there, breathing like I'd just run miles. Because for the first time since December 2013, I wasn't just surviving someone else's plan. I was choosing one of my own. And I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Victoria. Not yet. Not until I was sure they couldn't take it from me. So I kept working, kept sending money, kept smiling when my mother texted, "Received," and quietly, secretly started building a future that would one day walk into the operating room and change everything, including the way my family had always told my story. January 14th, 2018. That was the day my life quietly split into 2 different realities. On the surface, nothing looked unusual. I still worked the warehouse shift at Riverside Logistics. I still wore the same steel-toe boots, still counted boxes sliding down the conveyor belt, still sent money home at the end of every month. If anyone asked what was going on in my life, the answer looked the same as it had for years. But every morning at 8 o'clock, something very different was happening. I was sitting inside a lecture hall at UT Health San Antonio, wearing green scrubs, holding a notebook that felt heavier than any box I had ever lifted. My first day in the physician assistant program felt surreal. 36 students filled the room, most of them fresh out of college, their faces bright with the kind of excitement that comes from believing the world is still wide open. I was 28 years old and felt about 10 years older than everyone else. Not because of my age, because of the life I'd already lived. I had spent the previous 5 years working 70+ hours a week, watching other people chase their dreams while I quietly paid for my sisters. I had learned how to run on 4 hours of sleep and caffeine. I had learned how to disappear in rooms where no one was looking for me. So when the professor began talking about anatomy, pharmacology, clinical practice, something strange happened inside me. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt awake. Doctor Bradford had told me once that some people only realize who they are when the right door opens. Sitting in that classroom, I realized she might have been right. The girl next to me introduced herself during orientation. Beth, she said, smiling brightly. Where did you do undergrad? UW Austin, I said. Oh, nice. Recently? Not exactly, I answered. Beth didn't push, but she looked curious. Most of my classmates were 23, 24. They talked about internships, study groups, parties they'd gone to the night before. I talked less. It wasn't that I didn't like them, it was just that my world moved at a different speed. While they went home to study, I went to work. My schedule for the next 3 years looked almost impossible on paper. AA classes, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Warehouse shift, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Study time, late nights and early mornings. Weekends, catering jobs when bills piled up. Sleep existed in small pieces between responsibilities. Most nights, I got 5 hours if I was lucky, sometimes less. Energy drinks became a survival tool. I drank them like medicine, even though they made my hands shake during lectures. My backpack always held 3 things: anatomy textbooks, warehouse gloves, and instant ramen packets for the nights I didn't have time to cook. I studied everywhere. On the bus, with my textbook balanced on my knees. In the warehouse break room while the microwave hummed beside me. In the small corner of the apartment living room where a blue curtain separated my room from the rest of the world. Sometimes Grace would look at me with concern. You ever sleep? She asked once while I highlighted pharmacology notes at midnight. Eventually, I said. She didn't believe me. But she also knew better than to argue. The first semester nearly broke me. Anatomy lab alone felt like stepping into another universe. The smell of formaldehyde clung to everything. We worked in groups around stainless steel tables, carefully dissecting structures that most people only see in textbooks. The first time I held a scalpel in that lab, I felt a strange calm settle into my body. Not fear, not hesitation, just focus. Dr. Bradford sometimes walked through the lab during lectures. She didn't treat me differently than anyone else, but whenever our eyes met, she gave a small nod that said something simple. You belong here. That quiet confidence mattered more than she probably realized, because outside the classroom, nothing about my life had changed. My parents still believed I had simply taken on more responsibility at the warehouse. Every month I sent money home, just like before. My mother's texts looked exactly the same. Received. Or sometimes, Victoria needs help with books this month. There were never questions about my life, never curiosity, never concern. And Victoria, my little sister, who was now thriving in medical school, still lived in a completely different reality than I did. I saw glimpses of it through social media, photos of study groups, celebrations after exams, friends gathered around kitchen tables with takeout containers and laptops. Once she posted a picture wearing her white coat for the first time. Caption: First step toward becoming a doctor. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. Then I turned the phone face down and went back to memorizing drug interactions. Second year of PA school was even harder. The coursework got heavier. Clinical rotations started, and the gap between exhaustion and determination became thinner every day. One afternoon in February 2019, I fell asleep during pharmacology lecture. My head dropped forward, and I jerked awake when Beth nudged my shoulder. You okay? She whispered. Yeah, I said, embarrassed. After class, the professor asked me to stay behind. You're working nights, aren't you? She asked. I nodded. She studied me for a moment, then sighed gently. You can't learn if you're unconscious. I'll manage, I said, and somehow I did. Not because I was stronger than everyone else, because I didn't have the option of quitting. The irony of that time in my life is something I didn't fully understand until years later. While my family celebrated Victoria becoming a doctor, they had no idea that in a different building across the same campus, their other daughter was quietly becoming part of the same world. 2 medical careers, 2 Gonzalez sisters. One celebrated loudly, one hidden in plain sight. May 2021 finally arrived like the end of a marathon I wasn't sure I'd finish. PA graduation day. I remember the ceremony clearly. Navy blue gown, the auditorium lights warm and soft, rows of proud families filling the seats. When Beth walked across the stage, her entire family stood and cheered. When my name was called Janice Gonzalez, PAC, the room clapped politely. I walked across the stage alone, and for a brief moment, I felt that familiar sting of invisibility again. But then something unexpected happened. After the ceremony, Dr. Bradford found me in the lobby. You did it, she said. Those 3 words carried more pride than anything I'd heard from my own family in years. She handed me a small blue envelope. Inside was a certificate recognizing outstanding clinical excellence. I meant what I said, she told me. You were made for this work. For a second, I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod. Later that night, I took a photo of my diploma using my phone's timer in my tiny bedroom. Just me, standing against a plain wall, holding the piece of paper that proved the last 3 years had not been a dream. No balloons, no family celebration. But something inside me felt steady for the first time in a decade. 2 weeks later, Dr. Bradford called me into her office. I want you on my trauma team, she said simply. Surgical physician assistant. University Hospital, San Antonio. Starting salary, $92,000 a year. The number sounded unreal. I gave notice at the warehouse, at Clean Pro, at Sterling Catering. Tommy at Riverside Logistics paused when I told him. You found something better, he said. Yeah, I replied. He smiled quietly. Good. You deserve it. On June 1st, 2021, I walked into the trauma department wearing fresh scrubs, a stethoscope around my neck, and a new ID badge clipped to my collar. Janice Gonzalez, Pay C. Dr. Bradford met me outside the trauma bay. Ready? She asked. I took a breath and nodded. Yeah. The doors opened. Inside, a patient had just arrived with a gunshot wound. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the person cleaning up after the emergency. I was part of the team saving the life. And that was the moment I realized something important. The girl my parents once called their cash cow was gone. In her place stood someone they had never imagined. Someone they didn't even know existed yet. But eventually, they were going to find out. When I officially started working as a surgical PA in the trauma department, I thought the hardest part of my life was finally behind me. I had survived the warehouse, the sleepless years, the constant financial pressure. I had clawed my way through PA school while working nights and weekends. For the first time since I was 24 years old, my life felt like it belonged to me again. But the strange thing about healing is that it doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes you build a completely new life and still find yourself walking around the old wounds. Victoria began her surgical residency at the same hospital, that same summer, University Hospital San Antonio. Same campus, same buildings, same trauma department where I worked. That realization hit me the first day I saw the residency schedule posted near the staff lounge. There it was in black ink. Dr. Victoria Gonzalez, PGY1 General Surgery. For a moment, I just stared at the paper. Not anger, not jealousy, something stranger. 12 years of sacrifice had somehow brought both of us to the exact same hospital, except she had no idea I was there. I made a decision that day, one that might sound strange to people who haven't carried a complicated history inside their chest for years. I decided not to tell her. Not yet. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hiding out of fear either. It was something quieter than that. I simply wasn't ready. So I did what I had always been good at. I adapted. The hospital was large enough that people could exist in different worlds without crossing paths if they tried hard enough. Trauma surgeons, residents, nurses, emergency staff, surgical teams, everyone moved on slightly different schedules. I started requesting slightly different shifts, later lunches, earlier rounds. I even adjusted the way my name appeared on my badge, using a slightly longer version of my last name, Gonzalez Martinez, incorporating my mother's maiden name so it wouldn't immediately trigger recognition. It wasn't a disguise, just enough distance. For 3 years, Victoria and I worked in the same hospital without ever having a real conversation, and it became almost a strange dance. Sometimes I'd see her from across a hallway, once in the cafeteria, another time in the parking garage. The first time it happened was October 2021. I had just finished a trauma case and stopped by the cafeteria to grab something quick before the next patient arrived. It was around 2 in the afternoon, one of the quieter hours, when most residents were either in surgery or buried in paperwork. I grabbed a sandwich and turned toward a table. Then I heard her laugh. It stopped me instantly. Victoria walked in with 3 other residents, still wearing surgical caps, talking animatedly about a case they had just seen. Her hair was pulled back the same way she used to wear it in college. Her expression looked focused, confident, like someone who believed she had earned her place in that building. And in many ways, she had. I felt something twist in my chest. Before she could look up, I quietly turned around, dropped my sandwich in the trash, and walked out. I ate a vending machine granola bar in my car instead. That moment should have made me angry. Instead, it made me thoughtful. Because Victoria didn't look arrogant. She looked exactly like I used to look before everything changed. Young, driven, certain that the world made sense. Over the next few years, moments like that kept happening. Passing in hallways, seeing her name on surgery boards, hearing residents talk about Dr. Gonzalez during rounds. Sometimes I'd hear stories about her cases, how she stayed late to help a patient, how she volunteered for extra shifts, how she studied obsessively. The strange truth is, I was proud of her, even when it hurt. By 2023, things changed for me professionally. Dr. Bradford called me into her office one afternoon. "I'm promoting you," she said. The words caught me off guard. Senior surgical PA. I blinked. "Are you serious?" "You've earned it," she said calmly. "You've assisted in more than 300 cases, and the residents trust you. I need someone who can train the new ones properly." The promotion came with a salary increase, $128,000 a year. When I saw the new number on my paycheck, I sat in my kitchen for a long time staring at it. For years, every dollar I earned had gone somewhere else. Rent, debt, Victoria's tuition. Now, suddenly, my work meant stability. But the strange thing was, the feeling wasn't triumph. It was relief, a quiet kind of peace. I still sent money home occasionally, though much less than before. My parents never asked how I was doing financially. They simply assumed the transfers would continue the way they always had. One month I sent $500 instead of $2,000. My mother texted almost immediately. "Is everything okay?" I looked at the message for a long time. Then I put the phone down. For once, I didn't answer. Life at the hospital kept moving forward. New residents rotated in every year. Some were brilliant, some struggled. My role slowly shifted from assistant to teacher. I helped them learn surgical technique, guided them through difficult procedures, showed them how to stay calm when the operating room turned chaotic. And somewhere along the way, I realized something ironic. Many of the young doctors I trained were about Victoria's age. They looked at me with respect. They asked for my advice. They trusted my hands. Everything my family had once dismissed as support work had quietly become expertise. Then came March 2024. I was reviewing schedules for the trauma department when a familiar name appeared under senior resident teaching rotation. Dr. Victoria Gonzalez, PGY3. My stomach tightened. Third-year residents begin leading complex trauma cases, which meant Victoria would soon start operating as the primary surgeon under supervision. And that meant our carefully maintained distance might finally disappear. I tried to avoid it at first. I requested more night shifts. I adjusted my schedule again. But hospitals are unpredictable ecosystems. Emergencies don't care about family history or emotional timing. The near misses started happening more often. Once I stepped into an elevator just as the doors were closing and saw Victoria walking toward it down the hall, I hit the close button without thinking. Another time I heard her voice in the locker room while I was changing. I froze halfway through, pulling my shirt over my head, and waited until she left. It felt ridiculous. 30-something years old, hiding from my own sister. But readiness isn't logical. And deep down, I knew the moment was coming, whether I wanted it or not. Then, one afternoon in November 2025, Dr. Bradford called me into her office again. She closed the door behind me. "I need you on a teaching case next month," she said. "Okay." December 14th. Trauma surgery. I nodded. Then she added the detail that made my stomach drop. "Victoria Gonzalez will be the primary operator." For a moment, the room went quiet. "You'll be her first assist," Dr. Bradford continued. I took a slow breath. "Is there someone else who could do it?" She studied me carefully. "You're the best surgical assistant I have," she said, "and she needs someone steady beside her." "She doesn't know who I am," I said quietly. Dr. Bradford nodded. "I know, and after this case, she will." Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she added something softer. "You've spent years avoiding this moment, Janice, but sometimes the truth shows up in the operating room whether we plan for it or not." When I left her office, I felt the same strange mix of dread and clarity I had felt years earlier when I signed my withdrawal papers at UT Austin. Except this time, I wasn't the one losing something. This time, the truth was about to arrive whether my family was ready for it or not. That night I went home and pulled out a folder. One by one, I started placing documents inside. Western Union receipts, pay stubs, my PA diploma, photos of surgeries, salary statements, proof of everything that had happened in the years they thought I had simply disappeared. By the time I finished, the folder was thick. 12 years of my life sitting in one place. I didn't know exactly what I would say when the moment came, but I knew one thing for certain. In a few weeks, my sister was going to walk into an operating room expecting to prove she could save a life. And when she looked to her left, she was going to discover the person guiding her hands had been standing in that hospital all along. December 14th, 2025. For 12 years, my life had been a quiet series of sacrifices, boxes lifted, floors scrubbed, nights studied, money transferred. But that morning, everything I had buried was about to stand under bright surgical lights. I woke up before my alarm. The sky outside my apartment window was still dark, that deep blue hour when the world feels paused between yesterday and whatever comes next. For a few seconds, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar rhythm of my own breathing. Today was the day. Not revenge. Not exactly justice either. Just truth. I drove to the hospital earlier than usual, the manila folder sitting in the passenger seat beside me. It had become heavier somehow, though nothing inside it had changed. Western Union receipts, old pay stubs, my PA diploma, photos of surgeries, proof that the cash cow my parents once joked about had built a life they never bothered to ask about. When I parked in the garage, I didn't open the folder. I didn't need to anymore. The evidence wasn't for me, it was for them. By 7 a.m., the trauma department was already moving. Nurses rolled equipment carts through hallways, monitors beeped in distant rooms, and the usual smell of antiseptic filled the air. The operating schedule was pinned to the board outside OR3. Patient, male, Trant cat. Injury, motor vehicle collision. Suspected splenic rupture. Procedure, exploratory laparotomy. Primary operator, Dr. Victoria Gonzalez, PGY 3. First assist, J. Gonzalez Martinez, PAC. I had asked the badge office to print my name that way years ago, adding my mother's maiden name so it wouldn't immediately stand out. Until now, it had helped me remain invisible. But invisibility has an expiration date. Doctor. Bradford met me near the scrub room. "You sleep at all?" she asked quietly. "A little," I said. She studied my face the way surgeons study an X-ray, searching for cracks. You still want to do this? Yes. She nodded once. Good. At 7:40 a.m., Victoria walked in. I recognized her instantly, even though it had been years since we had stood face to face. Residency had changed her posture straighter, her movements quicker, the nervous energy of someone who had spent thousands of hours learning to make decisions under pressure. But some things hadn't changed. The way she tucked stray hair behind her ear, the way she pressed her lips together when she was concentrating. She greeted Dr. Bradford first. Morning. Then she glanced at me briefly, reading my badge. Morning, she said politely. Just another colleague. Just another assistant. We stepped into the scrub room together. 3 minutes of scrubbing felt strangely intimate after so many years apart. Water ran over our hands, the smell of surgical soap filling the room. Victoria spoke first. I've assisted on cases like this, she said, voice tight with nerves. But this is my first time leading one. You'll do fine, I said calmly. She exhaled slowly. I hope so. We walked into OR3. Bright surgical lights illuminated the patient already draped in sterile blue. Machines hummed quietly. Nurses checked instruments. Anesthesiology monitored vital signs. Dr. Bradford stood at the head of the table. All right, she said. Let's begin. Victoria stepped forward, gloved hands hovering over the sterile field. I moved to her left side, first assist position. When she finally looked up fully at my face, recognition arrived slowly, like dawn. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. Wait, she whispered. My voice stayed steady. Hi, Victoria. The color drained from her face. Janice? Janice? For a second, the room felt completely silent. Dr. Bradford's voice cut through it with calm authority. Focus. We have a patient. And just like that, the moment had to wait. Victoria took a breath, fighting through the shock. Her hands trembled slightly as the nurse placed the scalpel into her palm. I leaned closer, my voice low enough that only she could hear. You're okay, I said. Start at the midline, slow and steady. Her eyes flicked to mine again, confusion and disbelief colliding. But training kicked in. She made the incision. The procedure moved forward like a rhythm we both understood. Blood pooled along the surgical field as we opened the abdomen. Retractors held tissue back. Suction cleared the view. Clamp, she said. I passed the instrument. Expose the spleen, I guided quietly. Doctor. Bradford watched from across the table, occasionally offering a short correction or approval. Victoria's hands steadied as the surgery progressed. The initial shock faded, replaced by the focused calm that every surgeon learns to find inside chaos. The CT scan had been correct grade 3 splenic laceration, bleeding but manageable. Control the vessel, I said. Right there. She followed my instruction, placing the clamp exactly where it needed to be. Good, I said softly. For the next 2 hours, we worked together like we had always been partners in the operating room. Victoria cut. I assisted. Dr. Bradford supervised. The damaged spleen was removed, bleeding controlled, the abdominal cavity cleaned and inspected. Slowly, carefully, we began closing. Time of closure, the nurse called out, checking the clock. 10:42 a.m. Dr. Bradford pulled off her mask and nodded. Excellent work, Dr. Gonzalez. Victoria stepped back from the table, her breathing slightly heavier than before. The patient was stable, alive, and only then did the emotional weight of the morning finally return. In the hallway outside the OR, she turned toward me. Her voice was almost a whisper. How long have you been here? 4 years, I answered. Her eyes filled with disbelief. 4 years? You've been working in this hospital for 4 years and you never knew, I finished. Does Mom know? She asked. No. Dad? And Quickterv? No. She rubbed her forehead like she was trying to rearrange reality. I don't understand, she said. Before I could answer, the hallway door opened. My parents walked in. They had come to celebrate Victoria's big surgery day. My mother carried a small bag of pastries from a bakery down the street, something she had probably planned for days. They stopped when they saw me. Confusion spread across their faces. Janice, my mother said slowly, What are you doing here? Victoria looked at them, still shaken. She was my first assist today, she said. My father frowned. First assist? What does that mean? Dr. Bradford stepped forward before I could speak. It means your daughter helped guide the surgery, she explained calmly. Janice is one of our senior surgical physician assistants. She trains many of our residents. My mother blinked rapidly. Janice works here? Yes, Dr. Bradford said. I set the manila folder on the small break room table and opened it. Receipts, pay stubs, diploma, photos. My father picked up one document slowly. This says you make $128,000 a year. Yes. My mother's voice shook. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her carefully. Because you never asked. Silence settled over the room like dust. I spent 5 years working 75 hours a week to pay for Victoria's school. I continued quietly. I sent thousands of dollars home every month. And one day I heard Dad say something. My father looked up slowly. You called me the cash cow, I said. Victoria covered her mouth. I heard it, I added. On the phone, March 2014. My father's shoulders sagged slightly. We didn't mean... I know, I said. But it happened anyway. Dr. Bradford folded her arms and spoke calmly. I've worked with Janice for years, she said. She has helped save hundreds of patients, and today she helped guide Victoria through her first complex trauma surgery. Victoria's eyes were wet now. I didn't know, she whispered to me. I know, I said gently. Then I closed the folder. I'm not the cash cow anymore, I said. I'm part of this hospital. I help people live. No anger, no shouting, just truth. For the first time in 12 years, my parents looked at me not as the daughter who paid the bills, but as the person I had become. And strangely enough, that moment didn't feel like victory. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for a very long time. The truth is, this story was never really about revenge. It was about being seen. For years, Janice lived in the shadow of expectations. She sacrificed her education, her comfort, even her youth, so her sister could chase a dream that the whole family celebrated. While everyone applauded the future doctor, the daughter carrying the weight behind the scenes became invisible. But life has a strange way of revealing the truth at the right moment. Not through anger, not through shouting, but through quiet proof. In the end, Janice didn't stand in that operating room to humiliate anyone. She stood there because she had become something far greater than what people once called her. She became the steady hands beside the surgeon, the teacher behind the resident, the person who shows up when a life is on the line. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming someone undeniable. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or taken for granted, remember this. The world doesn't always see your sacrifices immediately, but what you build with them can change everything. Thank you for listening to this story. And if you enjoy powerful human stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel Revenge Drama House, where every story reminds us that even the quietest lives can hold the strongest journeys.